military operation to topple Saddam Hussein is now underway.
We're seeing history unfold.
It's weapons of mass destruction.
And now in full, a cheer goes around the square.
Journey there, I think we were all quite quiet, and our translator just sort of kept whistling and just saying, We drove straight to the school and there was already a crowd. And there was this helicopter buzzing around. I don't know if you've ever heard an Apache helicopter, but they've got a really distinct sound, and they just sound evil. The crowd had swelled and people were getting more agitated. They said, we're going to march to the hospital. But to go to the hospital they needed to turn left. Instead of turning left, they turned right towards the Ba'ath Party headquarters, which is where the Americans had withdrawn to.
I'm a fire starter, twisted fire starter. You're a fire starter, twisted fire starter.
Things were starting to get a bit tense. They had someone to vent their anger at because they had American troops in this building. They were getting a lot louder. Out of nowhere, this convoy just started to drive straight up the road. Demonstrators were on. I saw some people throwing sandals, and they do that because that's the ultimate insult.
We want to talk about photos that can change the world or change people's thinking. I mean, you think of some of the ones over the years. There's some of the famous ones of, I remember Muhammad Ali boxing underwater. There's also the iconic shot of that young Japanese girl in Hiroshima fleeing away as the bomb's going off. It's just terrible images. And Sydney has its own. On January 31, 1999, the Sun Herald published a shocking image of a 15-year-old boy shooting up in a syringe-littered gutter at taxpayer-funded mobile exchange in Caroline Lane in Redfern. We want to talk to the man who actually took that photo. He's a freelance photographer. His name's Julian Andrews. And Julian, welcome to the Grill Team.
As his vehicle came through, I just followed it, and then when it passed, you could see that there were people that were lying flat on the ground, or trying to lie flat next to a curb to get some kind of protection. I saw this guy dying in front of my eyes. I saw this guy kind of half standing up with his head, top of his head missing, and it wasn't a very pleasant thing to see. But as he fell down, because it was a boiling hot day, and as the blood poured out of his head and hit this boiling hot road, there was this sickly, sweet smell of his blood. And that is something I've never been able to sort of get rid of. If I think about that day and that incident, that smell instantaneously, like it's there, I can smell it.
I can smell it. Can you imagine what it's like having the guy standing just in front of you have the top of his head blown off? Can you imagine what it's like in the middle of the night hearing as 3 bullets go whistling past your ear so close that you can feel the wind blowing in your ear? Shit! A sniper has me in his sights and he's only just missed me. Can you imagine what it's like to be so close to huge explosions that you can feel the shockwave hitting you in the chest and you know you only have seconds to hit the deck before the deadly shrapnel comes flying your way? Can you imagine what it's like to be subjected to an attempted carjacking, knowing that if it's successful, the inevitable outcome is execution? And can you imagine what it's like on 2 occasions to have the barrel of an AK-47 held to your throat, and again knowing that if things go wrong, you're going to die? Do you think it's any one of those things which came the closest to killing me? The answer is no. Can you imagine what it's like when a man beckons you over to his car because he wants to show you something, and when he opens the boot of the car, it's filled with the dismembered body parts of his family who've just been blown up by a missile? Can you imagine what it's like seeing people digging up the tortured skeletal remains of their relatives so that they can give them a proper burial? Can you imagine what it's like seeing landmine victims in Afghanistan and wondering what the quality of their life is going to be moving forward? And can you imagine what it's like in Africa, walking up and down a queue of 1,500 people, many of whom are going to die within hours, with a doctor who has to choose the 500 that he's going to try and save? And can you imagine what it's like to see 4 adults trying to prise a little girl away from her mother, who she is clinging onto like a limpet, but she's too young and too traumatised to understand that her mum is already dead? Now, do you think it's any one of those things that came the closest to screwing me up? Well, the answer is no. The answer is it's something that could happen to any one of you watching this right now. Now, you've just heard about some of the biggest moments of crisis I've faced in my life. Did I have post-traumatic stress after these stints covering conflict? Well, the picture on the left was taken on day 1 of me in Afghanistan in the Panjshir Valley, and the picture on the right was taken 3 months later. It's not just the beard which is different. I think you can tell there's something different with my eyes. And obviously in the film that you've just watched, which was filmed nearly 10 years after the Fallujah massacres, you can see that I was quite clearly still suffering from the trauma that those memories brought up. So here's a list of some of the symptoms of post-traumatic stress. You'll notice I've crossed out the D for disorder because I actually hate that word. But do any of these sound familiar to you guys? In times of crisis, it's more important than ever to think critically for ourselves. As Jim Rohn said, we need to stand guard at the door of our own minds. Because in times of crisis, it's really easy to get drawn into the drama, to allow our fears to take hold, to become overly anxious, to fall into the trap of thinking the future is bleak with no good outcomes for us, to actually not think straight when this is the very time that that's exactly what you have to do. On a professional level, I've faced crises of just about the highest level on multiple occasions. Certainly, in some of those occasions, there was an element of luck involved with me getting out. Or, if you want to look at it that way, the intervention of a greater power. But more often than not, it was my ability to operate in a calm and rational manner, to think fast and straight, and to evaluate instantaneously in order to make good decisions and act upon those decisions immediately, which took me to the good outcomes, which in turn has enabled me to be here today to share these stories with you. Now, you've heard of the expression of a cat having 9 lives. Well, if I'm a cat, I've already lost 8 of mine already. There was the 16-year-old boy soldier who had a falling out with me, held his gun to my throat, and was so full of adrenaline that I was worried he was going to pull the trigger by accident. Then there was the opium high Northern Alliance guys, this picture taken just before they slammed the door and held me hostage for 4 hours with an AK-47 held to my throat. There were the sniper bullets that just missed me. There was the Fallujah shooting. There was the angry mob who later that day wanted to kill us. There was the attempted carjacking. There were countless times when I was super close to the explosions. And then I lost my 8th cat life when in 2012 I was asked to go to Syria with the celebrated journalist Marie Colvin. Now, I was running the London Marathon that year, and I said I could go on the Monday, but I wasn't prepared to go on the Friday, so I turned the trip down. She went instead with the French photographer Remy Ochlik, and on the 22nd of February 2012, they were both killed in Homs in a shell attack. So if I'm a cat, I'm pretty scared right now. But I'm convinced that having the ability to control my mindset in these most extreme of crises is what actually saved me. And when I look back at all of these incidents and countless others throughout my work trips in hostile environments in Africa and the Middle East, it's clear to me that there are so many scalable and usable lessons that can be transferred across to any kind of crisis, and in particular become really poignant in the crisis we're facing today. And I just want to run through some of those super quickly. It's really important to stay razor sharp in your mind. You have to remain focused. You have to think primarily of your outcome. Think quickly about the steps that you need in order to achieve that outcome. Crucially, you have to gather as much information as possible. And you need to make sure that the information that you gather is from a reliable source, because in times of crisis, we need proper information. Information equals knowledge, equals focus, equals your personal reality. And as we all know here, where focus goes, energy flows. And as we also all know here, knowledge is not power, it's potential power. Execution trumps knowledge every day of the week. Good information gets results, bad information can trip us up. The information we focus on determines what we will decide to do. So once we have the information and the knowledge, we then have to package that up and feed our minds only positive thoughts so that our focus goes towards the positive outcome we are aiming for. The better the quality of our thoughts, the better our chances are of reaching our outcome faster. So once you have the knowledge and the focus aligned, you unlock the potential power to execute. Obviously then, you need to take massive positive action immediately. You need to run with your instinct. You don't necessarily stick with the crowd because the psychology of the crowd is usually one of fear. So make your own decisions, not the one that the crowd perhaps are urging you to make. And finally, when you change your thinking in a crisis to one of significance, ideas and solutions jump out at you. Now, in Afghanistan and Iraq, there were many occasions when my goal was quite simply, how do I get out of here alive? Let's look at a tiny bit of detail at that day in Fallujah and how it unfolded in terms of my mindset. Actually, let's start with the mindset of the demonstrators that got fired upon. They were never supposed to march to the US base. They were supposed to go to the hospital. And as I said in the film, instead of turning left, they turned right. Who made that decision? Someone did. It kind of doesn't matter who did. But the reality is that despite their fear, the rest of that crowd turned right as well. And they turned right and walked into a massacre that would take 3 lives and critically injure 16 others. So when the bullets started fizzing past my head, I found myself in the very place that you are never supposed to be in a hostile situation. And that's between 2 enemies. Luckily for me, there were no Iraqi bullets being fired on that particular occasion, just Americans. But I remained razor sharp and focused, not just on my job, but on the events that were unfolding in front of me. The guy right here, he gets shot. Was that bullet meant for me? Shit, he's dead. Shit, I'm dead. This is it. Finally, shit, 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 shut the fuck up, Julian. Concentrate. Center yourself. Focus. What outcome do I need from this? I need to live. I need to get out of here. I don't just need to get out of here. I need to get out of here so that the rest of the world can see what has happened here today. How do I live? I need to get back to the car. Where is the car? 200 metres to my left. I have to look at what's between me and the car. How many people are there? How angry do they look? Is there a gap? Is the direct line to the car the best line to go? Or is it better to go round a longer way? I have to process this information. I have to change my mindset. I will make it to the car. I'm going to grab the journalist and I'm going to extract us both from the crowd. There's Chris, there's the gap, let's go. Now the whole Fallujah shooting took just 18 seconds. We know this because of the time code on my camera. 18 seconds of carnage and mayhem, followed by maybe a couple of minutes of aftermath, followed by mindset management, situation, evaluation and action. That 18 seconds on that day paved the way for the rest of history in the world, because military historians will say that that day was the start of the insurgency in Iraq and the beginning of the emergence of ISIS. Now, many of you won't like what I'm about to say, but when you work as a photojournalist, you have to follow the story. And on that particular day, that meant going to the hospital to see how many dead there were, how many wounded there were, and to get some eyewitness accounts. That's just what we do. Now, we had spent the majority of that day with these very people. We had been invited in their homes to drink tea. We had been invited into the mosque to talk to the imam. We had been treated with respect, and we had treated those people respectfully. But when we got to the hospital, we faced a totally different situation. Last week, the 24th of April, was the 17th anniversary of the Fallujah massacres, and it was the first time our Iraqi translator had ever spoken about this day. He wrote about it on his Facebook page. I'm fortunate. I get to speak about it at times like this, and the journalist I was working with, he wrote a very successful book. But Adil, our translator, guardian angel, lifelong friend, he wrote about the scene at the hospital. I'm going to read a little excerpt. It was written in Arabic and translated. We arrived at the hospital with hundreds of civilians, men and women, and sparks flying out of their eyes. I saw some of them carrying Kalashnikovs. I asked the driver to park his car at the main gate of the hospital and never to come in with us. Spies, Jews, catch them, are the words I heard from the angry crowd. I asked the journalist and photographer to go immediately and without discussion to the car. They started shooting at us. And once we got to the car, they started shooting at us. Our car landed on the asphalt of the public street after a number of bumps and small bumps near the hospital. At a crazy speed, we returned to Baghdad and reached the hotel in less than half an hour. Now, I'm actually very lucky. I've been fired at by Kalashnikovs on many occasions, and I'm just blessed that it's one of the most inaccurate guns in living history. Now, I love an analogy. So here's my analogy on managing mindset in a crisis. For me, it's like you're on a yacht on the ocean in a storm, maybe in the centre of a cyclone. You're in danger of the boat capsizing and sinking. What do? The first thing you have to do is secure your own life jacket. Attach your safety line, reef the sails, go below decks and batten down the hatches. It's very much like that analogy of putting the oxygen mask on yourself before helping others. You must then try and reach the eye of the storm, where you know the ocean will be flat calm. There will be no wind. And whilst the storm will be raging all around you, you have the calm and the peace and the tranquility to make decisions based on the information you have to hand. You know at some stage you will need to sail out of the eye of the storm and back into the storm again, because that is the only path to your destination. But within the eye of the storm, you can make informed decisions and prepare properly for what will come next. You can take that time to refocus, to think of the process you will need to get through to make it through the storm to a better place. You will have time to find absolute clarity about your outcome and the steps needed to reach it. You will need to find courage to head back into that storm again. And you will. And once you've thought through all of these things, you're ready to start sailing again. Now, what we're facing now is not that much different to what I faced in Afghanistan and Iraq. Make no mistake, we're at war with an invisible enemy that's trying to kill us. Many of us, including myself, have lost our jobs or our work, and the fear of the unknown future we may face is very real, and it would be easy for us to be negative or to let it overwhelm us. There's an almighty storm circling Earth right now. The key is to find the eye of that storm. Bring yourself to your centre and go through all or some of the steps I previously mentioned. We need to view this time as an opportunity in whatever area it is that we can see hope and joy in our lives. If you are feeling fear, embrace it. Dance with it. Use its energy to power your sails and sail headfirst through that storm towards your destination. As a final note, I want to mention that as we travel through this storm and appear to be heading out the other side of it, it's never been more crucial for us to be really in tune with our mental health and the mental health of those people around us. I guess it was inevitable that I would get post-traumatic stress after the things I witnessed, but post-traumatic stress does not have to be triggered by bombs and bullets, and depression does not have to be triggered by life-changing loss. Every person has a uniquely different tolerance and reaction to each situation, and now, more than ever, we need to be kind to ourselves and kind to one another so that we can all come out of this stronger and more together. As for me, what have I chosen to focus on during this time? What opportunity has made this difficult time not just bearable, but utterly joyful? Well, I'm a single dad. I co-parent with the mum of my two beautiful boys who I have 50% of the time. I've always done lots with them. But suddenly, as my focus adjusted to everything that was going on and the huge storm circling all of us, I had absolute clarity that my one and only outcome in all of this was to make this time as happy and loving as time as possible and as big as an adventure as possible for my kids. An adventure where we totally adjusted our thinking, where we tried new things, things we had never thought about trying before, things we never had time for before, that we laughed as much as possible and we hugged as much as possible, that we lived life for the moment and stopped worrying so much about the things we didn't have control of. We focused on maximising this time we had been given so that we could look back on it in years to come as being a fantastic time. And then I realised furthermore that if I wished that for my kids, then I needed to wish that for myself too. Adult and parental worries or not, this is a time to shine. It's a far easier thing to say than it is to put into practice, but the reality is that whilst we tend to focus on the material things and the loss of our jobs and income, we can't take material things with us. So it truly is far better to focus on experiences, for those memories will stay with us forever. As Dr. Wayne Dyer said, don't die with your music still in you. Don't die with your purpose unfulfilled. Don't die feeling as if your life has been wrong. Don't let that happen to you. Now is the time to write your symphony. Me and my boys, we've trimmed our sails and we're waiting for the conditions to be perfect to sail purposely back through that storm to reach our destination. And it's going to be a glorious destination. We've shaken life up a bit. When we're out of the storm, we want a new norm. We have become so close in the past couple of months. We've experienced so much together, so much new stuff, and along the way we've learnt so many lessons. We've improved our lives immeasurably, and I can say absolutely that our lives will never be the same again. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Sasha, for your help.